a little background on Credit Suisse. So we talked about Credit Suisse last week about how they are possibly going to be one of the triggers for the financial collapse. After doing a little bit more digging into it, I found some interesting stuff as far as what Credit Suisse is involved with the Vatican, how they're involved with that. And I thought it was interesting. So, in case you don't know, about a month and a half ago, Pope Francis came out and basically said that all financial assets and liquidity needs to be in the Vatican Bank by September 30th. Obviously, we have passed September 30th at this point. Now, what makes this interesting is at the same time he said he wanted all the financial assets attached to the Vatican in the bank. That's the same time that Credit Suisse started to take a mega downturn. They were hurting before, but it was about the same time that Credit Suisse started to go big time downhill. And so the Holy See institutions and the Secretariat of State, they have accounts connected to several Swiss banks, including Credit Suisse. So kind of putting two and two together, it sounds like when when the Pope said you need to pull all of your financial assets wherever they're at and put them into the financial bank or the Vatican Bank, it sounds like all these people pulled their money out of Credit Suisse, which caused the massive downturn for them. Interesting connection. Also, what's interesting is Credit Suisse helped loan a London property deal involving 9 different people in the Vatican, including cardinals and the Secretariat of State himself, which was uncovered as an extortion, embezzlement, and money laundering scheme. They got caught for that. I think that was 2020 that happens. They're still dealing with legal stuff on that. But what also is interesting at this is the Credit Suisse actually took a huge, was helping loan this extortion ring, basically, and Credit Suisse took a huge dive, which drove up the CDS credit default swaps. You're basically you're betting against the bank, you're betting for them to fail, type of thing. So when all this stuff started happening, the credit default swaps, the betting against them started to take off, and it was the same time the Vatican institutes pulled out their financial assets. So it sounds basically like what is going on here is it was that trigger from the Vatican that actually caused this Credit Suisse thing to get to the point where it could start blowing up the global financial world, which is very interesting. Also adding on to Credit Suisse, because of the issue that they're in, the deep trouble that they're in, they're now looking to offload assets. They're starting to sell their properties, including like the Grand Hotel, Zurich's Savoy Hotel. They're looking to try and sell that in a massive fire sale. They're also trying to sell the Credit Suisse HQ building itself, which is valued at 1.3 billion euro. They had a deal for that, which actually ended up falling through. So they're trying to just unload all of the physical assets they can to bring in some money so they can try and keep afloat, but it's not working. And then spinning into that, Credit Suisse is connected to the Swiss National Bank, which is the central bank in Switzerland. They are a part of a list now of central banks that are now operating in the red. They're now taking losses. You've got the Federal Reserve, the Bank of Canada, the Reserve Bank of Australia, the Bank of England. We'll talk about them in a second. The Monetary Authority of Singapore, and then the Swiss National Bank. All these central banks are now taking losses. They're all operating in the red. And why this is significant is in order to reset, because that's the point, the Great Reset. In order to reset things and to bring in the new beast system, the central bank digital currency, the one world economy, you have to demolish what's already there. You have to get rid of what's already there. And so when you start seeing central banks of all these different countries collapsing, they're turning red, they're taking losses, they're going negative. There's no way that they can pull themselves out of this. They're getting ready for all these things to just collapse so they can all bring in, hey, we've got a fix. We've got a fix for this. And so that's definitely something that we need to keep an eye on. Also, what we got going on as far as this stuff goes is the Bank of England. This is some serious big news that's coming out now as far as, I mean, yeah, Credit Suisse is definitely could be a trigger, but we might have something coming up here as what's going on in Europe. First things first, the bond markets globally are becoming completely poisonous to the point now, like I said, all those central banks, they're in the red, they're taking losses. That has to do with the bond markets. That's just debt. They're just holding all this debt. That's one of the things that's going on right now, is why everything is kind of floating in midair. It's not really going up. It's going down, but it's not like full on roller coaster crashing. And that's because these central banks, the reason why they're in the red is because they're buying and holding all of their own debt. They usually rely on people to buy the bonds, the debt, to help keep them up. But at this point, nobody wants to buy them because they're so volatile. And so now all these central banks are holding on to their own debt, which that's not going to work. It's just not going to work at all. And so because of this, now there's rumors going around that by the end of the week, there's going to be a global margin call. They're going to be basically telling everybody, hey, we need you to start dumping more money in to cover the debts that we're holding. And that's never going to work out. And the big one is the European pensions. This is where it gets very, very bad. The Bank of England right now, how it's operating is the what's the best way to describe this? It's either we continue to make inflation higher, or the destruction of your pensions is going to happen. There's no way out of it. I posted on Telegram a couple weeks ago how the UK entered a death spiral. And that's basically what this is, where the Bank of England is continuing to print pounds to buy their own inflation-linked debt, their own bonds. And so they're creating more inflation to basically buy more inflation-linked debt. And so it's just become a death spiral. There's no way out of it. Now, what's interesting is today, this is the big news that came out today, was one of the governor of Bank of England. He actually came out and told the pension funds, the funds that hold the pensions, you've got 3 days to figure this out. He basically said, you've got 3 days to sell it all. What that means is in 3 days, because right now they're printing more pounds in order to hold everything up. He said by Friday, you have to sell everything because we're turning the printer off. We are not going to print any more money to hold this up. If this happens, because there's been it happens all the time. They go out and they issue these things, and then, oh no, we changed our mind. So if this happens, just say goodnight to the financial world in England. And those pension funds are linked everywhere, including America. And so that will send a shockwave out globally across the markets, and it could start getting very, very bad, very, very fast at that point. So that is definitely something to keep an eye on. That's on Friday. So we got to keep an eye on what's going to happen. Is it, again, they may change their tune. They may continue to print things. But again, that's just continuing that death spiral that's happening right now. Literally, there's no other way to put it. It is the literal hand of God holding the financial markets up right now. There's no other way to put it, because if this was just any other time, things would have been breaking by now. I mean, things are breaking, but I mean, they would have been broken by now and the floodgates would have opened up. So right now, with everything that's going on, it's literally the hand of God that's holding this up, because it's not time yet. It's not time yet to let it all fall. Also to keep in mind, bond returns right now, again, debt returns for 2022 have hit the fourth worst time in history since 1700. Right now, the bond returns are comparable to the times of the U.S. Civil War, World War I, the Marshall Plan, and when UK ditched the gold standard. So that's kind of, again, a look into just how volatile these bonds are right now and why nobody wants to buy them, which is why all these central banks are having to buy their own debt and then hang on to it. So it's getting, again, I mean, this could definitely be something that goes south really fast. And Europe, because of everything's going on, a lot of the outlook is what's going on with the Fed as far as rate hikes and whatnot. Because of that, Europe is now lashing out at the Federal Reserve publicly for what they're claiming to be. They're the ones ushering in the world recession. And when somebody like that says world recession, it means depression. Which, I mean, they're not really wrong on this. The Federal Reserve is definitely leading the charge on this. Of course, they're getting a little help from their friends, but they really are. So much so that the UN right now, publicly this past week, actually called for the central banks all over the world. They specifically mentioned the Federal Reserve, of course. Then they said the other central banks, you guys have to stop with the rate hikes. Otherwise, it's going to crash the global economy. Well, I mean, if you have any idea what's going on, it doesn't matter if they stop or not. I mean, it's going to plummet. I mean, again, death spiral. We're not coming out of this. We're not getting out of this. And it's just, oh man. I wish there's so much stuff that I see during the week that I wish I could send to you guys, but my word, I would annoy you if I was to do that. But like I said, the Federal Reserve is leading the charge on this. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this is I was actually watching Pastor Tom Hughes' live stream with John Haller. I think it was yesterday. And they were talking about some of the stuff that's going on financially, and the subject of why is the value of the dollar continuing to go up right now. And I was listening, and I was like in the chat. I'm like, I know the answer. I was trying to, like, obviously there's so many people over there, they're not going to be able to see it. But I want to go ahead and answer that question. Because they weren't sure. They're like, oh, why? They couldn't figure it out. Why is the value of the dollar going up? And so to help kind of bring all of this financial mumbo jumbo together, they're weaponizing the dollar right now. So something I've talked about for a while is the dollar is going to crash, but it's not going to be the first one to go. They're weaponizing the dollar. They're going to use the dollar as the last one to go, because the dollar is the global currency. They're the ones that's holding everything up right now. And so they're weaponizing it. And what I mean by that is the higher value that the dollar holds with higher U.S. rates, because they continue to hike rates up, the higher the value of the dollar and the more rate hikes that they do, other countries must follow suit in order to keep their currencies from collapsing. So they're weaponizing the dollar. So by continuing to put the rate hikes in, the other central banks have to do that in order to keep their currency afloat and keep it going with the dollar. But if you look at, like, with what's going on with the pound, and you look at with what's going on with the Japanese yen, they are worthless compared to the dollar. Even though they're putting in rate hikes, they're trying so hard to keep it going. So what they're doing is they're crashing all the other world currencies' values. So the dollar continues to go up. All the other ones continue to drop down because of what the Federal Reserve is doing. And so they're creating this giant gap between them. And so when they're ready to pull the plug, you just have the reserve pivot, everything comes tumbling down with it. That's why the dollar value is so high right now. That's going to be the last one to go. Right now, it's a weapon to bring all the other currencies to their knees, which is what's happening. So if you continue to fight inflation like what Europe is doing, it's going to crash. And then if you've got what the Reserve is doing, weaponizing the dollar and their rate hikes, as soon as they pivot, it's going to crash. There's no way out. And what they're doing, and what the people upstairs that actually control the Federal Reserve, your secret governments there, the elitists there, they're the ones that are in control of the Federal Reserve, and they're weaponizing everything to bring it all down at the same time. So I don't know if anybody here was watching that video, but that subject did get up. I just thought I'd go ahead and answer it on my own over here. So that's what's really going on as far as this goes. So right now, what we're watching for mainly, I know Credit Suisse is with what's going on, but right now we're going to be watching to see what happens this Friday, and I would say Monday after that. So something interesting could happen. Something very interesting could happen.